Welcome back to another episode of the IFC's Individuation podcast. I am Dr. Lahab Al-Samarrai, and with me today, the usual wrecking crew. We have Dr. Eric Tomlinson and Dr. Lisa Hong. And we are back with Mary Louise von Franz, Archetypal Symbols and Fairy Tales. This is the second volume of her collected works, The Hero's Journey. So without further ado, let me introduce everybody. How's everybody doing today?
Doing well, thank you.
It's a gorgeous day.
Beautiful day in Seattle today, which we don't get many of these days. So without further ado, we are going to get into the nitty-gritty of this story. And today's story, we are gonna, who would like to read today's Norwegian fairy tale? So we've had many fairy tales from around the world. And Lisa is gonna read our Norwegian fairy tale today. And the title of the fairy tale is The Youth Who Wanted to Win the Daughter of the Mother in the Corner, which sounds fascinating. So I look forward to learning more about this fairy tale with everybody. Okay, Lisa, take us away.
There was once a useless, lazy boy who danced around and did nothing the whole day long. He continually outgrew all his clothes and ate more and more each day. Finally, his mother could not keep up with the mending and the cooking, and she said he must now really go to work or they shall starve. The boy said he was not going to work. He would marry the daughter of the mother in the corner. This turned out to be a rat who lived in the swamp and carried a bunch of keys hanging from her tail. She bestowed on him great riches, gave him linen and woolen threads, which he had to trail behind him, constantly repeating the words, short before, long behind, whereby the fabric lengthened and grew. In the end, perhaps in response to his somewhat flippant greeting at the beginning, she required that he marry her. On the way to the wedding, the rat traveled in a frying pan through the swamp, and the young man had to walk beside. But gradually the road became more passable, and the rat transformed into a beautiful princess, and the rat's hole changed into a beautiful castle. The end.
So fascinating. So basically, if you're lazy, you end up trying to get out of something. You end up marrying a rat. But all right, I will not make jokes about rats anymore. Rats, okay. So the rat is a magical creature. Like in other fairy tales of toads, they're transformative creatures in fairy tales. The rat is like the toad, an animal of the earth, she says, the darkness and a symbol of the mother goddess. The rat may also have a witch-like character. Here she appears as a generous and giving mother. So this is von Franz, and she starts to talk about, so there's a useless lazy boy who danced around and did nothing the whole day long. He continually outgrew all his clothes and ate more and more each day. So basically he's getting old in this house and he's still acting like a child. So he continually outgrows his clothes and ate more and more each day. Finally, his mother could not keep up with the mending and cooking, and she said, he must now really go to work or they shall starve. So now, he's old enough and he needs to take control of taking care of himself, feeding himself. The boy said he was not going to work. He would marry the daughter of the mother in the corner. This turned out to be a rat who lived in the swamp and carried a bunch of keys hanging from her tail. She bestowed on him great riches. and gave him linen and wool threads, which he had to trail behind him constantly, repeating the words, short before, long behind, whereby the fabric lengthened and grew. So, in the end, perhaps, in the response to his somewhat flippant greeting at the beginning, she required that he marry her. On the way to the wedding, the rat traveled in a frying pan through the swamp, and the young man had to walk beside. But gradually, the road became more passable, and the rat transformed into a beautiful princess, and the rat's hole changed into a beautiful castle. So this is a magical dream. This is a dream about transformation, how we transform, how we grow, how we change, how as we change, our needs change, how we go from what is basically a dependent stance in the world to an independent stance, and how we find ways to take care of ourselves. So there's a nurturing quality to this rat. And she holds everything that he could ever wish for. She holds all the magical aspects of riches that he requires to live with. The maturity and the alchemical change that we have to go through as we mature is what enriches us. It's what gives us the power to transform things into linen and gold, which was the currency of that day. We have many different forms of currency now, but the currency of that day was linen and gold in the story. What do we think of the story?
I just think it's a story of a lazy boy who just got lucky and didn't make much effort and happened to land on something and was too lazy to fight it and followed it, and it got him a new house and some new clothes. And I'm just like,
so
I'm kind of with you on that, because this guy wouldn't even work.
So Dr. Lisa has a feminist perspective on the issue.
yeah, didn't try very hard.
of the lazy good for nothing who found the riches in the corner of the room.
He didn't even leave his house. It was just in the corner of his house.
That's true. He didn't have to leave the house
Well,
to obtain the riches.
I've got if she had a feminist view of it, I had a masculine view of it.
Okay.
And we came to the same conclusion.
Okay, so well, it's interesting. I mean, in a lot of ways, I think that both of you are correct. But I think this is what also gives what enriches us is imagination. And I think this is another aspect to the dream, that our imagination is what enriches us most. Without our imagination, we lack creation, we lack creativity. And this is a creative solution to my problem. She sits in the corner and she holds all that I need.
Mhm.
Yeah. So somewhere in the psyche, there's always a key to where the treasure lies. So within your own psyche, you'll always find the answer to what has gotten you stuck, has left you in a lurch. That's when we reach out and find that piece of us that will help us navigate. The answer is always internal. The external does not provide any answers. The external only reflects what we already know. If we did not know it, we wouldn't see it. We wouldn't understand it. We have to know it to understand it. So it comes from the internal source. The external could stare us in the face all at once. I think what's the term that is used? Don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Okay, but if you don't know it's a gift horse, then what? Because you don't know. So knowing is the key always to our central issue, our central problem. How do we find a solution? How do we find a way out? How do we find the road back? So this is the story of the hero. Now, this is also the solution comes from the animal. The solution comes from the feminine. The solution lies in the rat. He must marry the rat. It lies in the feminine, but she is still a symbol of the maternal, as we could tell by the story. The mother in the corner, the daughter of the mother in the corner. Okay.
I appreciate that in the story, the boy trusted his instincts and offered himself or made an agreement with the rat and complied with the rat's requests or expected behaviors or rules. Such as, I'm sure they didn't say in the story, but I'm sure he was told to carry the fabric and repeat this word as you carry it. This phrase, short before, long behind. And I'm sure he was told to, on the way to the wedding, you cannot leave the rat in front or behind you, but you must always walk beside no matter what. And I'm sure there were things that he did that were to trust the journey, the path that he was instructed to follow.
And that's always the trick, right?
Mm-hmm.
Always the trick is that we have to trust the path that we have taken.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we start questioning the path, we get lost. So we have to trust the path so we can move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the alchemical process that occurs is that once he decides that this is his path, then he must go all the way to the end. He must marry her. Symbolically, he must marry her to transform. There needs to be a partnership. To marry is to take two and become one. These transformative events in our life, these changing moments, where the mother takes care of this lazy child, And the child seeks out a secondary mother in marriage. The transformative process still takes precedent. It forces you to change. Life forces you to change. Life forces you to change into something different, to be someone different. When you're a child, the world looks differently. You are different. The stages of your life are different. The person that existed yesterday does not exist today. That person is gone. The echo of the person that stayed yesterday was, there's an echo. Someone who used to be there. We are what remains of today. I think, Lisa, is there something going on you want to tell us about? Is there somebody making noise in the background? We apologize to our listeners briefly. We had an interlude, a musical interlude, if I could say. I have a dog barking at me for the last 15 minutes. I'm still trying to figure out what the dog wants while we interpret the story. Back to our story. So remember that we started out with the story of the simpleton, which was also very similar to this story, if you remember. The simpleton relied on the toad. This is another story about the simpleton. So, shall we read the next story? Why don't we do that?
Can I make one last point about this story?
Oh, yeah. Go for it. You can make
Because
many points.
I like the fact that she put him to the test, because she said, it says, perhaps in response to his somewhat flippant greeting at the beginning, she could tell he was flippant, lazy, a little bit of a smart ass. And so she required him to do something that's not easy to do. She required that he marry her, and on the way to the wedding, the rat traveled in a frying pan through the swamp, and the young man had to walk beside. Now, I've had to walk through a swamp before, and it scared the hell out of me. It's not easy walking through a swamp. You're anywhere from ankle deep to waist deep in water that you can't see 1 inch beneath. And there's weeds, there's bushes, there's trees. And every second I'm going, oh my gosh, I hope a water moccasin doesn't bite me, an alligator bite me. It's scary. And a lot of people won't walk through a swamp unless they're in protective gear. And this guy did it. And she was in a frying pan, so she wasn't underneath the water the way he was. She wasn't walking through the swamp. She was floating on top of it. And he did it and didn't complain. And, I think she put him to the test. And at least on that level, he came through with flying colors.
I think it's interesting that it's a frying pan that she's in. I think symbolically that she is carried in a frying pan. It's almost like She's carried in a spaceship.
Or she's being carried in the duty that she'll have to do later because she needs to feed him.
Well, I'm guessing. I mean, it's like what is the
Now that was feminist.
yeah? Well, is she gonna cook for him or something? It's interesting. It's a frying pan, so it symbolizes two things. It's like, well, this is also I'm being fried in this frying pan. What do I get? What do I get from this story?
Or
Ooh.
he's going to get out of the fire and into the frying pan. As
Well,
the phrase
yes, I mean that's the other aspect of this story. But it's a frying pan. Interesting. Okay, so he somehow makes it through. Bonfran says the simpleton represents the part of the soul that is related to the conscious personality. But reaching into the unconscious, a connection to the anima represents, therefore, the continuation of the fourth function into the unconscious. Once the youth has overcome his last suspicions, laying aside his critical judgment, complies with the commands of the toad, all the spiritual forces blossom into unimaginable beauty, and the toad, the great mother aspect of the anima, becomes a loyal princess. The same thing that happens with our guy, with the rat. It's almost like the same story. So he has to oblige the rat. She wants to be carried in a pan, side by side, a frying pan. But because he stays, she bestows on him great riches and gave him linen and woolen threads. When he had to trail behind her, constantly repeating the short before, long behind, she gave him a task. On the way to the wedding, the rat traveled in a frying pan through the swamp, and the young man had to walk beside. But gradually, the road became more passable, and the rat transformed into a beautiful princess. The rat's hole changed into a beautiful castle. This also symbolizes that what we think of something transforms. What we can see as important as a treasure is transformative in itself. So how we see the world, and how the world reflects what we see. When we look at the world and we see that riches lay there, then we feel rich. We feel compensated. We feel the world is giving us back something. When we stare at the world and see poverty, then the world replies with poverty. It gives us back what we found, what we believe there is. This is the source of the universe, creation. The thought is creative in itself. It creates. The idea that there is riches creates riches. The idea that there's opportunity creates opportunity. The idea that see roadblocks creates roadblocks. What you see in front of you, what you are projecting, what you are thinking is going to happen, will happen, because you've just created it. You've created the path. If the path looks open, then you will feel that the path is open, but you just created the thought. If the path feels closed, then you will look at the path and it's closed. But you created that thought too. Creation comes from you. What stands still in the world, what stands in front of you is created by you. You are the transformative power in this universe. This is what your creation was for, to transform. The aspects of your life that you cannot transform are not due to an outside force. They're due to the lack of imagination. Transformation is all around us. It's in everything. Just think, just think about it. I mean, it's like you wake up in the morning, you want to have breakfast. You crack a couple of eggs. You scramble them. You put a little jam and butter on toast. You have the eggs. That's a transformative process. That was this morning, so they all disappeared. It's in the afternoon. The toast is gone. The jam is gone. The eggs are gone. Once you put them in your mouth, they're gone. The idea of them has transformed also. The transformative idea is that you wake up in the morning and you say, I'm going to have eggs, toast with butter and jam. You've already had breakfast. It's done. You created the idea, and therefore the idea came into existence. That's how everything is done. We create the idea. Oh, I'm going to do this today. I'm going to write a paper today. Well, you just created an idea. And therefore that creation is born into the world. It now exists in a different form. It doesn't matter what it used to be. It has no relevance anymore, what it used to be. It is what it is now. That is the most important aspect of the story. The power of your imagination to be able to transform, to see treasure where other people see pain, to see riches where other people see poverty. That is your power. It's an individual power. Nobody can own that power. That's your power. This is when we think of somebody who is healthy, when we think of somebody who is psychologically and emotionally healthy, we think of somebody who could project creation. I want to do this, I want to do that, I'm going to do that. I'm going to go travel. I'm going to find a toad, turn him into a prince. The idea of creation. You should have seen him when I met him, she said. He was a toad, now he's a prince. Transformation. Our imagination does not hold us back. Our imagination gives us freedom. The great thing about imagination is it gives you freedom. What holds you back is fear. What do they think? Fear. What would they say? Fear. Will they just laugh at me? Fear. Imagination has no fear. Imagination is a creator. It is the ultimate creator. It reflects us back to our origin. And whatever you believe your origin is connected to. The story of how you were created or why you were created. Whatever that story is, that myth. Creation reflects back to that. And we all have a myth of how we were created, for what reason, what path. Even if somebody says, I have no reason to be created, they believe there is a reason because they just stated that they had no reason. So it's a contradiction. I was created as a contradiction. That's what they're saying. But there's still a creation story. The simpleton's advantage in the world is that they have no limitations, meaning they have no ego. To conquer.
Yeah, I wanted to go back on what we touched on the last time we were talking about the feather story, the other simpleton.
The three feathers, yes.
The three feathers, where Marie von Franz was talking about the four aspects of empirical functions and the thinking, feeling, sensing, perception, and intuition, and how we all have a dominant trait as individuals, and using the all of the traits equally, without judgment, without ego, without preconceived notions, without expectation, and trusting what it is, then we can be the hero and emerge, having gained more than we expected. And I think all of these stories the stories so far have reflected that.
Yeah, so the hero, the first part of the hero's journey is to break free of whatever they're afraid of, because they can't move past that. So they have to basically set free all preconceived notions of their existence, because most of the heroes come from a simpleton background. They're born either orphans. They don't know that there's a journey ahead of them yet. That's why they're simpletons. But when they're on the journey, this is where they become heroes. Because it's what they don't let get in their way. It's how they hold their fear. Because what happens with fear is that there's a loss of control. Oh, I'm afraid, so I need to control it. And then there's a vicious cycle. You're stuck. Now you're trying to push away fear out of fear. It's a very vicious cycle. It's like a dog running around, chasing its tail around a tree. The purpose of imagination is creation. The purpose of creation is imagination. Imagination needs to be nurtured. Imagination is the way forth for all of creation. I always hear John Lennon's song in my head. Imagine. Imagine there's no country. Imagine. Nothing to live or die for. Imagine. So this is all about creation. The toad, the rat, all about creation. How do I see creation? And how is creation then taken within me? Any thoughts?
I just I just sent a friend this morning thought for the day. I guess this is synchronicity, and it happened to be the Einstein quote about imagination.
Mm,
I mean, in summary, it just says that it's not our thinking, it's our imagination that allows us to see beyond. So, synchronicity.
mm. Creation. Beautiful term.
I like that quote, Eric. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Yeah,
What
I
is
didn't
the-
quote, I
what is
didn't quote
the-
it verbatim, so look it
What
up.
is the verbatim quote, Eric?
I don't know. I don't know it verbatim.
Okay. Creation. So, any thoughts on our hero so far? Our hero is a simpleton. He's lazy. He doesn't know what the world looks like. He's never done anything in his life. He's never faced danger. Danger of hunger, danger of not having a roof over your head. It's when he faces those things that then he starts to become a hero. Because at the beginning, he's lazy, he's a simpleton. He's sitting on his ass waiting for life to give him something. He doesn't know he has to move in the world to be able to get something back. You get what you create, the saying goes. You could see as far as your imagination will let you go. Your imagination is always freedom. Always remember, you are the creator. You are not just the creation. With that, we at the Institute for Conflict would like to say, we are not afraid.
We are not afraid.
We are not afraid.
We will be back next week to take a deep dive into the archetypal symbols and fairy tales and through another hero's journey. As we get through the chapter, we have finished the first chapter of the simpleton, and we move on to chapter 2. So we look forward to carrying you through, sharing our stories, and reading Von Franz next week. Take care, everyone.